So we're going to be starting this episode off back in the Python REPL, or read eval print loop. In my last video, I briefly went over how to get a different sort of terminal solution for Windows. I'm using git bash and a console emulator called Commander. So if you want to see how to install that on Windows, you can go right ahead. And all of this code and all of these procedures will also work on Mac and Linux. Okay, so to open up the Python REPL, I'm just going to type my Python alias, and you can just press enter there, or you can be a bit more explicit and type -i. The -i is called a flag, comes after a space and a dash, and that is going to tell Python to run in interactive mode, which is the mode that we want to get into our read eval print loop. So I'm going to press enter. And you can see that we now have an active Python prompt. So I'm going to start out by typing out last episode's tiny Python program. That was just print and then hello world. And you can see that all it does is it makes Python print hello world to the console. So in this example, hello world is a string. For our purposes now, a string is just a bunch of characters or letters between single quotes or double quotes. Python's print statement, though, will also handle printing out numbers. To show that, I'm just going to have it print out a very simple number, print, and then open parenthesis, and I'm going to just do the number 42. And I'm going to close that, press enter, and you can see it handled printing out 42 just fine. So we can assign values like numbers and strings to variables using the equals operator. So to do that, I'm just going to give my number a name. I'm going to call it meaning _of life. And I'm going to use the equal sign operator, and then I'm going to set that to 42. And so now Python has stored 42 under the name meaning of life. So we could now just use that where we used 42 before. So to show you, I'm just going to do print meaning of life. And you can see that it knows meaning of life is 42. So something to note is that when we're using the REPL, since it is a read eval print loop, we don't actually need to type print when we're just writing an expression like this. It will just evaluate our expressions and it will just spit them out by default if we just type them in. So let me show you that now. If I just type meaning of life, this is a quick and easy way to inspect that value, and it has just the same result as printing the value. All right, so let's do something with our numbers. Numbers can be manipulated using many different operators in Python. For example, addition. If we inspect the value of our new variable called added, we can see that it has become 43. 42 plus 1 is indeed 43. Let's show subtraction. Multiplication. Whoops. There we go. And division. Division is going to be an operator which differs a little bit from some other languages' division operators. So to show you that, let's just type this out. So some languages may have considered 42, our meaning of life variable, as an integer and just lopped off the decimal place from the result of this division. This distinction is not typically going to be pertinent to your everyday Python code. You can, however, get this behavior if you want it using a separate operator called floor division, which looks like this. So as you can see, that just went ahead and lopped off our decimal place. Most of the time, though, you're not going to need or want that behavior. So with all that explained, let's write a program which is going to let us choose two numbers and use all of these operators on them, sort of like a calculator. We're going to go ahead and write this code instead of in the REPL as a module. Modules are very simple to make, so I'm just going to go ahead and minimize this for now. And all I'm going to do is create a new text file on my desktop. On Windows, I'm just going to do that by right-clicking, pressing New, and Text Document. And then I'm just going to double-click into this, and we should see that Notepad opens up because it's the default text editor in Windows. In the future, I'm going to be using a different text editor for this, but just to show you that there's nothing strange about these files, they truly are just a bunch of text, we're going to use Notepad for this first module. So to make this program, I'm going to go ahead and declare two variables, one of which is going to be the first number and the other one is going to be the second. Then I want to compute the result of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division between these two numbers. And as you can see, I went ahead and assigned all of these values to variables, which I named descriptively. You always want to name your variables in a way that you're going to know exactly what they contain. So the last thing to do is to just have Python print out all of these values to the console. So there's addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Okay, so that is pretty much it for our module. Now what I'm going to do is turn it into an actual Python module and not just a regular text file. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to come up here and say file save as. I want to make sure I don't save it as a .text file. I want it to be a .py file, even though it's just an extension, like that doesn't actually affect the contents of our file. It's just a convention. So I'm going to call this calculator.py. And then once I press save, we should see, second now, yes, calculator.py has popped up on my desktop. So to run a Python module, we're just going to go back into our terminal. I'm going to go ahead and exit the REPL using exit and an open and close parenthesis. And I need to change the working directory of my console over to my desktop. The way I'm going to do that is just using a simple console command. And yeah, this isn't really like a console or terminal tutorial, but I do want you to be able to use just a few basic commands for this. So we're just going to do cd for change directory and then a space. I'm going to do a ~/ D desktop. And that command should work for pretty much any major platform in terms of changing over to your desktop directory. Okay, so from here, we're going to type our Python alias and then a space. And then we're just going to type the name of our Python module on our desktop, which is calculator.py. And once I press enter, it will execute and show the results of our code. And yeah, as you can see, let me pull these up side by side. So you can see over here that we have successfully determined 42 plus 4 is 46. 42 minus 4 is 38, 42 times 4 is 168, and 42 divided by 4 is 10.5. So everything worked correctly. Unfortunately, though, it's a little hard to tell just by looking at these what they all mean. Like, we just have to go by the order. We know that it's first add, then subtract, then multiply, then divide. But it would be pretty nice if we could have some labels on these numbers. But to do that, we're going to need some strings. I'm going to go ahead and clear the junk in this console just by using the clear command. And then I want to hop back into the Python REPL to show you some information about Python strings. So we already know how to create and print a string just like we did with our Hello World program. But what if we want to combine another string together with this one? Well, for that, there are many different methods. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to be explaining one: format strings using keywords. I chose this method since it's the most readable and arguably the simplest and most scalable built-in method. So generally, it should be your first choice of string manipulation methods. We're going to start with a toy example. I want Python to print "my name is Tars" on the same line as "Hello World." But I also want to be able to easily change the name from Tars to any other name that I want to. So let's start out by assigning our Hello World string to a variable. To do that, I'm just going to give it the name message and assign it that value. And so just like with numbers, we can now use that variable in place of our string. So now let's modify that message to include my name. And we can go ahead and print that out. Now, unfortunately, this is not going to let us easily change the name from Tars to something else, like, say, Jane. So what we want to do is employ a format string here. So I'm going to yet again reassign our message variable, and this time it's going to become a format string. Format strings just use curly braces with names between them as a placeholder. Those placeholders can then be substituted later by the format string method. And to now substitute in our name for that variable, which we called name, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to assign it to a new variable called formatted message. And then I'm going to just take the message variable and use a dot or period, and then type the word format. That's going to call the format method on this string. And then I'm going to do an open parenthesis and just put name equals, and then I'm going to put what I want it to equal, which in this case is a string, Tars, and close that parenthesis. And then once I press enter, we have a new variable called formatted message, which actually was created from our original message variables. So let's go ahead and inspect that variable. As you can see, we were able to reconstruct that string. But it's super easy now if we want to change it to a different name. So here's Jane, for example. If we inspect that variable, you can see now it says, "Hello world, my name is Jane." And it turns out that we can actually put in as many placeholders into our string as we want. So if we wanted to add labels to our calculator program, we can then refactor our code, which is just to say change and substitute things about our code, just like this. So instead of just printing these out directly, we're going to introduce a new variable, which I'm going to call format string. And we're going to use multiple placeholders here. So we want the ultimate output of this program to say something like 42 plus 4 is 46. 42 times 4 is etc., etc. So let's go ahead and do it like this. So we're going to have our first number, and then we're going to do an operator such as plus, minus, times, divide, etc. And then we're going to have our second number. And then we want to say is, and then put in some result value. And I'm just going to go ahead and full screen this so that we can see that entire line. So I've got the text size so bumped up here. And so now I want to show you what it would look like to use this in the case of just addition. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to make another variable which is going to be called, let's say, add string. And that's going to be, we're going to take the format string, then we're going to call that format method on it. And then we're going to assign a value to all of these names up here. So first number, we want to be equal to 42, which we've assigned to the variable number_1. Same thing goes for number 2. So let's do first number equals number 1. Then we're going to do a comma and a space, and then we're going to type in the next thing that we want to do, which is going to be the operator. So for addition, I'm just going to go ahead and make this a plus sign in a string. And then we need to move on to our next value, second number. And we're just going to set that to number 2. And then the last thing is we need a value for our result, which is going to be add result. Okay, and a little tip here is that we can actually sort of beautify our code a little bit by doing a line break at this parenthesis here and then indenting a little bit on the inside of these parentheses. So I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to continue adding new lines at each comma and doing that same indent. Most text editors that are actually meant for programming are going to sort of do most of this formatting for you. But since we're doing this in Notepad right now, I'm just going to go ahead and show you how to do that. Okay, so now this sort of reformatted statement is going to have exactly the same effect as our first one. So now if instead of printing out the addition result directly, we just print out our add string, then you can see what happens. Let's go ahead and save this. And I just did that by pressing Control S. I'm going to go back into our terminal and I'm going to exit the REPL again. And then I'm just going to rerun our Python module, python calculator.py. And so what you can see here is that now instead of saying just 46, we have a really nicely formatted string that says 42 plus 4 is 6. Much more clear what that number actually means now. Let's go ahead and duplicate that code for the other operators. And I'm going to cheat a little bit just by doing a bit of copying and pasting. So let's change this. So we're going to do the subtract string. And instead of a plus sign, let's make this a minus sign to represent subtracting. And then the result, we don't want it to be add result. We want it to be subtract result. And I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other two operators. And then the last step here is going to be to use these strings in our print statements. All right, let's go ahead and save this. We'll rerun it. And now you can see we have a much cleaner and well-labeled output. I hope you found this tutorial useful. If you'd like to see more of them in the future, it would mean a lot to me if you'd consider subscribing. In the next video, we'll be covering user input and control flow. See you then.